Hello everyone! Today we are checking out volumetric templates. This module is probably very complex to try to put into words, so I'm gonna try to do my best. But bear with me. So, on a very surface level, what volumetric template does is very conceptually simple. It changes the flat templates, which are just areas, into volumes. So the cone will actually be a 3D cone, the circle will be a sphere, the square will be a cube, and so on. So let's check some options and settings because this can get quite confusing. What the module does is auto-targeting for templates. That's all it does, but it does it in some specific ways. So first, this module, of course, it's a level add-on. It requires levels. And let's check what this is. So this is the first setting, which is very important that you configure to your liking. This is the volume percentage. What does this do is simple. How much volume must intersect before something is considered a valid target? So if you have a sphere, your tokens are always going to be cubes in terms of hitboxes. So if I have a sphere and this is set like 1%, it just needs to barely touch it and it will be a valid target. If this is set to higher, like 50%, my sphere will need to cover at least half of the token before it's a valid target. This all is considering 3D space. So this is important that you configure it. This module is not system specific. It will work on anything. So if you want rules that are most accurate to the 5e rules, for example, that would be a 1%. 1% will give you exact by the rules, cover rules, template rules, except for spheres that have different rules, so they won't be exactly correct, but you will be mostly fine. So let's check everything else. Dynamic auto swap. This is a very important settings that you should have enabled, so maybe double check if you don't. And this will automatically decide if it should use volume or area for a template. So as you probably know, you need some additional information usually to figure out something in a 3D space. But for example, a circle, you just need the radius. Doesn't matter if it's a circle or a sphere, you just need the radius. The cone as well, I don't need additional information, but for cubes and squares and rays, I do need to know how tall they are for cylinders as well. This will basically automatically figure out, depending on how much data you feed it, what shape to use. And so basically it means that it will never fail outright if you don't give it enough data. It will revert automatically to the 2D version. Then we have check collision. We will go more in depth on this. Check collision, this is very simple. It checks from the origin of the template. So if I have a random template here, so it will check, it's telling me 0%, I have the debug enabled, but it will check if there is a wall between the center of the template and the center of the token. If there is a wall, that will not be considered a valid target, basically. Then we have enable volumetric by default and hand mode by default. We will talk about this later, but what these two toggles do, it's simply enable some of the settings in the template menu by default. And you will see them if I disable the dynamic auto swap, because if this is enabled, the manual stuff is removed from the menu. And then we have the debug mode. You can enable it to test it and try around, because it will show you these numbers here. Now, let's check. Let's go to manual and see what this does. So now I'm on manual, and I have two settings, a lot of settings actually in here. Let's go one by one. Let's start from the bottom. So this will tell the system if it should use 2D or 3D. So if this is disabled, it will just use regular 2D calculations. So as you can see, this is just a simple circle. I'm at 0 elevation, this is at 0. And it calculated the area of this. But if I go to this, I'm gonna try to make it as similar as possible, but you can see that it's considerably lower, because now it's a sphere and it has a curvature on top, so the volume is not the same as the area. So that will toggle between 3D and 2D. Then we have these two very simple toggles. This is like ignore self, so it will ignore yourself when you target, and this is just ignore friendly characters. Then we have this place templates at hand height. So this is not configurable, it's just like a number that it is automagically generated depending on the token height setting from levels. So if I have this elevation, the loss height, it will like create a number between like your feet and your head. That is kind of where the hand is. That's basically what it does. And that's it will create templates by default at that elevation instead. Now we can see if this works. Let's see. There you go. As you can see, it created the template at 3 feet, which is like what it thinks is kind of the hand. This is very useful for cones, because cones, if you cast them like at ground level, they will be very weird in their geometry. It's very hard to explain, just like trust me on this, basically. But if the cone is on the ground, it will be basically cut in half, and you will have like way smaller numbers than you would expect. Then we have this. So this makes a cylinder instead of a sphere. So how can we test this? So if I disable, if you remember, let's disable volumetric. I'm just going to use circles. It works with everything else, but it's simpler like to abstract. So let's try to make it kind of the same as before. You can see that now we have this 50, this set. I need to make it like somehow a precise thing. Okay. So this seems pretty reproducible. Okay. So this 55, you can see that like logically, you see that kind of it's a bit more than half that's been targeted. This is an area, not a volume. So remember this 55. Now I'm gonna delete it. Gonna enable the 3D and do the same. Now it's less because there is a curvature. Okay. And now I'm gonna place as a cylinder. Now the cylinder, if you think about it, if it's tall enough, it will count the same as a circle. So we expect like 55. But the cylinder needs an additional value, right? Because we have the radius of the circle that we draw, but we don't have how tall it is. So to define custom properties on the template placement, you have this neat little button. This will set elevation and extra information for the next place template. So let's say I still want it at 0, but I want my cylinder to be 10 feet, right? We go back to the templates. Now we place again our thing, and we should expect like a 55 or so. There we go. And now, for our final trick, our token by default, by the default level settings should be like either 6 or 5 feet tall, depending if you have the auto or the default manual, but it doesn't really matter for this experiment. What we will do is set how tall the cylinder is to 3 feet. So we should expect that 55 to be basically halved. So we expect kind of like a 22 or something. Let's see. So we place it again, kind of in the same spot. And now it's 43. Because we set it at 3, so I'm assuming my token is tall, it's 5 feet tall. But we set it at, just to show again, set it at 2. And we go back to this. And we do the same thing again. Now it's 29. So you can see that this will alter that. And this number, this special, how it's called, will be the height of a cylinder. It will be nothing really for the cone. It will be how tall a cube is. And it will be how tall a ray is. If you leave this at 0, it will be assumed that the thing is not 3D. So let's go back and enable again the automatic thing, which I like. This is my suggestion personally for the settings. And now it's all automatic. So how does it work? When you cast a spell, you can either ignore every setting and just use it because it works well with levels. So it will not target tokens that are on different floors because it checks like the 3D space around you. And it will basically just take mostly 2D stuff, but it will do cones and spheres as 3D by default. But let's say you want to cast something that is a cube. Like, I probably don't have a spell that is a cube, but let's assume I have Thunder Wave. You don't have a setting in the spell itself because this is system agnostic. So before you cast it, you can set the number. In this case, for the circles, if you set a number for the special before you cast anything that has a circle, it will assume it's a cylinder. So let's try to cast a cylinder fireball, for example. Now I cast fireball, we consume, and we go like here. And you can see that this is the same number we had before. So this is actually a cylinder. This is like all I can explain. I know it's kind of complex to understand because like we are talking about 3D space, but we don't have any visual representation for it. But basically this is how it works. It mostly works automatically unless you need to cast something which has some extra data. In that case, you can either give the system that data, or you can ignore it and it will use the standard 2D and it will not interrupt your normal game flow. So it only like adds extra if you want to take the extra step. This field, I did not explain it. I think it's pretty self-explanatory, but it will place a template at the specified elevation. So anything that you set in here is only for the next template. And if I set something, like I said 10, and then I click this again, you can see it's a toggle. Now I disabled it. So basically it deletes whatever you set it to. And this is basically it. By default, the template will be placed at whatever elevation you are. So if I go here, and I'm placing a 10 without setting anything. So set everything to auto and you should have a pretty good experience. If you want to go the extra step, you can set like the height of cubes and stuff like that. I hope you enjoyed this module. I hope you have fun. I hope this is useful to you now that it even has MIDI-QL integration if you're using it in 5e. So when you auto-target with MIDI-QL, it will automatically use a levels volumetric template if you have it enabled. So it's pretty neat. Have fun and enjoy this module.